Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, whether you're dialing in from the Southwest here in the UK or from wider afield, a very, very warm welcome to the Online International Business Forum. And today we're focusing for the next hour and a bit on transforming skills in supply chain and logistics. My name's John Harris. I'm going to be looking after our expert panel today. And I'm from the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. My job is to support and lead on the development of education, professional development and training. So a very warm welcome to our panel. I'm just going to ask each of them, before I set the scene with a few words, just to introduce themselves. We've got 5 excellent presenters with a lot of experience in this sector. So I'm just going to call out your name and ask you just to say a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and a bit of your background. So let's start with James.
Well, hello everybody. It's delighted to be here today. Should be a lively discussion, hopefully. My name is James Tillier. I'm representing a small consultancy called Transformotion. I've been working in road transport now for about 20 years, mainly on driver development and driver education. And I am involved in a number of European projects, both currently and ones that have just finished, mainly looking at the environment of technology with vehicle autonomy, distracted devices and how it all relates to driver learning. I'm also currently launching some virtual reality driver training to hopefully advance the process of vocational training for professional truck and bus drivers. So that's me.
Excellent. So a very, very warm welcome to you, James. Let's go across to Katie. Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to join you today. My name is Katie and I work for Internmatch International in the UK as their head of partnerships. For the last 10 years, I've worked within the UK higher education sector with a specific focus on careers and employability for both students and graduates. And during this time, I've supported specific programs for international students from the US and now head up our UK university and company partnerships for Internmatch. So our ethos is to help fantastic student and graduate talent get matched to organisations where they can use practical experience to develop both soft and hard skills. So really expanding and building on their studies. And we now operate globally, helping people to intern from anywhere to anywhere with the new remote environment that we've been all seeing, and allowing companies to access talent they previously weren't in a position to consider. So I'm really pleased to be here with you all today.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie. And obviously we've had an opportunity as CILT to actually start to form some global partnerships with Katie, and indeed have taken on interns over the last year with some very, very good results. So Katie will pick up certainly on the employability and skills development agenda with you later on. Let's stay with the ladies, if we may. So Reshma, all the way from Malaysia, please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you very much, John. Hi, everyone. It's evening here in Malaysia. My name is Reshma Yusuf. I represent the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport in Malaysia, and I also run my own training company. We focus pretty much on logistics and transportation training, specifically with regards to dangerous goods training for the maritime and the road transport sector. So I've been in the field for the past 25 years, and we also work very closely with our Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Human Resources in Malaysia to understand what the industry needs. And we craft out programs that would address, the requirements in terms of skill gaps here in Malaysia. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Reshma, for taking the time this evening. Let's go to Dr. Menon, who is over in the UAE. Lovely to have you with us, Satya.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone from Dubai. I'm Dr. Satya Menan. I am the CEO of Blue Ocean Academy. We are the largest training company in the Middle East and the only super branded training company here in this region. I'm also the Vice Chairman for CILT UAE chapter. I'm also a MD of 5 other companies where I handle artificial intelligence. I have one company. I have another organization which is into digital transformation. We using design thinking. I also have a sports management consultancy. I'm the managing director for that. So I have multiple businesses. But throughout my life, last 30 years, I'm in the profession. I've been a thorough supply chain person. Yeah. So all my qualifications, everything is related to supply chain. And I'm also a business process reengineering consultant, where we help organizations to transform. We do end-to-end transformation of organizations, both digitally as well as, from the process and the systems point of view. Thank you, John.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. I've just noticed we've been joined by Mohammed as well. Hi, Mohammed, a warm welcome to you from Blue Ocean as well.
Hi, John.
Hi there. Great to have you with us. Do you just want to say a little bit about what you do at Blue Ocean?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mohammad Shafi. I'm working at Blue Ocean Academy and Senior Director of Operations, looking after programs like CILT, APIX, and CIPS, many other programs.
Excellent. Excellent. And a warm welcome to the team. Can I just check if anyone has joined, could you just mute yourselves if you're not speaking? We are getting some crackles and things coming in and we're being recorded. If that's possible, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Last but not least, let's go back to the UK. So Chris, tell us about your role and what you do.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, John, for the introduction. My name is Chris Steele, and I'm probably the odd one out in the panel here because I very much come at this from an industry perspective and not specifically in terms of transport and logistics. My background for the last 10 years has been in the aerospace sector, but I think what is particularly relevant to the discussion today is that I am leading an initiative in the Southwest, which is looking at developing centers of excellence around new technology and how that new technology is applied in the transport sector cross-sectorially. And the first one of these new technologies that we've established under a regional skills cluster is looking at how hydrogen is going to be manufactured, stored, distributed, and used in transport. And then we are following that up with looking at the same kind of approach for looking at electrification in the cross-sectorial application in the transport sector. So that's where I'm coming from, and nice to meet you all.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Chris. You're not quite the odd one out, because in terms of the audience that have been selected, we deliberately look to those organizations that provide professional and vocational training, but also this big question we'll come to later about skills readiness, about the ability to be able to absorb straight into a workforce and be productive, and the fact that employers are looking for competency rather than just knowledge. And that's something I think everyone will have a view on in the panel, particularly James involved at this kind of sort of the fierce end, if you like, of making sure that drivers and those that are managing them are actually equipped and they know what they're doing. But also Katie's work in terms of the interns that she's been working with. She's been taking people that have actually already graduated and are available to go into the workforce now, rather than just sort of your traditional placement or sandwich year arrangements. Many universities sort of do that very well themselves. This is about bridging into making sure you can actually do what you say you can. So I think there's a bit of a continuum from what I would call pure academic learning over this side through to this 100%, if it isn't going to help the industry, don't do it sort of approach. And many of you will probably identify somewhere along that line, and we'll unpack that a little bit as we go through the questions. I think as far as the CILT is concerned, so if you've not heard of them, that's the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. We are really here because we're passionate about learning, we're passionate about skill development, we're passionate about attracting more people into the logistics sector that has seen a paucity of, for example, women, and even in some countries, younger people finding, you know, it's not a very attractive career, it's almost seen like a lesser profession. And really, we're here to try and put that right. We've been going for over 100 years, so we are a chartered body, but we now operate in over 40 countries, and we have over 120 training partners through the arrangements that I'm responsible for. So that just gives an idea of scale. I think if we reflect around the skills sector as a whole, there's been a huge amount of change during the supply chain, during the pandemic. We've noticed that the smaller businesses have been more lean, more agile, more flexible. Larger organizations, it takes longer time to turn the tanker, although some have been extremely resilient. What it is telling us is that there's a brand new set of skills that are needed. Versatility and agility in the way learning and development activities are provided is a major issue. So within the CILT, most of our training partners were doing classroom delivery, and almost 100%, you know, focused on examinations. I mean, that is now blown out of the water, everybody, and we're working at a much more blended and applied approach. And finally, you know, our response is to allow those training providers the freedom to be able to assess using projects, using on-job learning, using exams, using assignments, using professional consultancy projects that are marked. All of those things are now in the game, and it's probably still not enough for what industry needs. So we're here as a global institute now, really thinking, hey, what next? There is a massive opportunity to try and support the, if I can call it the post-COVID world, but certainly the education and skills market has completely changed over the last 18 months. So that's a little bit of introduction. I think we're going to think about some of the gaps in skills. We're going to think about how we rethink training and skilling, and we're going to have to think a little bit about, well, if we could, do this fresh and we could have a blank canvas, what would we paint? What would that look like? So let's kick off. So Reshma, big question for you. So you're a you head up a training organization. You've been looking very, very acutely at the skills gaps in Malaysia and the surrounding countries in order for you to come up with your products. What's the biggest challenges you've seen in this skills area over the last couple of years from your own experience?
Okay, I'll have to give you a Malaysian experience, all right?
Because please do,
So one of the biggest issues we see in terms of a gap here is that there's been, prior to the COVID, there's always been a lot of focus in terms of knowledge and skills, competency development for the executives and above. So the people who are at the lower end of the, sort of like management hierarchy, the truck drivers, the forklift drivers, the team at the warehouse, many of them have pretty much been left to learning their skills or whatever through their jobs. It's pretty much on the job learning. And we still see that as a gap in a sense. Like, let's take Malaysia, for instance. I mean, I run dangerous goods training courses here, and we started out with maritime dangerous goods. And, when you look at movement of dangerous goods, either by air or by sea, because these are international movements, so the compliance, in terms of the rules, the international rules, they're all in order. But when it comes to domestic movements or the truck movements, and especially our truck drivers, we have pretty much not focused on them, in a sense that in the UK, you have the CPC, where you have certification for their professional competencies. And then you have sort of like a sheep dip where they go through this training every 5 years. And even if they're For those that are driving dangerous goods trucks, they also go for training specifically for that. So we're trying to emulate a few of these things. Of course, you know, being part of the CILT family, global family, we're leveraging over this. So this is one of the immediate things that we're looking at, is professionalizing our truckers. And then we're moving bit by bit to try and move them up. And also, you know, what the pandemic did was everybody had to race into, you know, digitalization and changing pretty much how they work. So there's still that issue, especially with the service providers, where the clerical staff need to understand certain methods in the way the system works. So there's still that. So that's pretty much how it is around Malaysia. And I would say I could even say for the Southeast Asia region for this, other than Singapore at this point of time.
Yeah, there's definitely a regional context there, isn't there, Reshma? But James was nodding a lot during what you were saying. Let's flip to the UK, James. I mean, you know all about the CPC and everything back to front. What would your take be on the big changes that have happened here in the domestic market and Europe, if you wish to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, the driver CPC framework is an excellent framework, and I think it actually brought into focus, for the first time for a long time, focus on truck and bus mandatory driver training. You know, previously it was always very much at a company level, and the aims and objectives of driver CPC were very admirable and still are. The problem we have is that it is a directive in Europe within the EU, so it is not applied the same all the way across. So each country has its own interpretation of the framework, and what tends to happen and what we've seen so far is that there is a slight difference in terms of the quality, in terms of the harmonization of driver training, and so what the objective was, which was to create a harmony across Europe for the benefit of mobility, so that drivers can come and go to different countries, actually has been a bit limited by the very framework that was created to address the problem in the first place. So whilst driver CPC is an excellent platform, the way in which you develop it and deliver it and the benefits that come out of it have to be really thought through, depending on your target area, the geography, and actually the culture. So the culture is a very important aspect of driver training, if we're talking global driver training. So that's really my observation with it.
Yeah, John, can I add in a little bit? James, thank you very much. I think what you said is really important in a sense that right now, in terms of ASEAN, we have this thing called the ASEAN Framework Agreement, and we're working out the goods in transit facilitation. So this is something that we want to have work out throughout the ASEAN region as part of the One Belt, One Road. So, you know, unify, maybe we can learn from the EU and from Europe in terms of what we should not do when we are in the process of developing ours.
Yeah. Thank you, Reshma. No, that's really helpful. I mean, I'm going to come to Chris now, because isn't there a bit of an issue here? So James has described a sort of cycle where there's been a need, there's been a really good framework, it's everyone, you know, it's clear. Whether it's right or wrong, the fact is it exists, but then it almost becomes a victim of its own rigidity. What would you say, because you're in this very fast sort of technological evolution stuff where, you know, what was, you know, new in 2020 is now out of date and it's only 2022. So how does that square with you with fast moving tech?
I think that, I mean, the first thing to say is that I don't have any experience around CPC and driver competence. And where we're coming from is looking at what is the technology that's going to drive carbon zero over the next 15, 20 years. And those two technologies in the transport sector are going to be, well, there are three technologies. It's digitization, it's the use of carbon, and it's the use of electrification. And the real challenge that we face here in the UK, and I'm sure it's going to be the same elsewhere in the world, is that we actually need to look at the end-to-end infrastructure, because how do you generate hydrogen? How do you store it? How do you distribute it? How do you dispense it? How do you service and maintain the vehicles that are going to use it? How do you train your drivers to be able to operate a hydrogen-fueled vehicle as opposed to a diesel-fueled vehicle? And it's similar in electrification. So I think that what we're doing here as a kind of early adopter model for developing the skills and training that are going to be required is looking at early adopters for the use of hydrogen in public transport. And that will be coaches, buses, rail, and HGV, and looking at it as an end-to-end infrastructure rather than just focusing on the driver element. So, as I say, I think our approach is dip your toe in the water, actually do something, and demonstrate that you're delivering something. And we're getting really good traction because this has been driven from industry demand by the early adopters.
Thank you, Chris. That was a really good answer, because I think what I'm getting at here is that for a long time, whatever sector you're from, whether it is transport or something else, we've been used to regulations, we've been used to frameworks, we've been used to a hierarchy, we've been used to a kind of ripple cascade, and the training that responds to it, in theory gets better and better and richer. However, I think you're bringing up a completely different dimension here, Chris, which is don't think of training and enabling in silos. And also, it's okay to test and fail, rather than get everything perfect and then say, let's have a training course to show everyone how to do it properly. Actually, early adopters do have to take some risks, and they do have to set out their stall. Yeah, do you want to come back on that?
I think you're absolutely correct, John. I think, one of the things that we've decided to do here in the southwest of England is that dip your toe in the water, and we may well fail the first time. The other thing to recognize, particularly with hydrogen, is that we're going to have to create the regulatory framework in order for hydrogen-related assets to be used in the transport sector. And I'm talking about the transport sector cross-sectorally. So it is, buses, coaches, trucks, rail, and potentially aircraft. So there are two different elements. But I think, say dipping your toe in the water and learning from some of the early mistakes that we're going to make with early adopters is really important.
Okay, let me go over to Dr. Menon. So a slightly different angle on that, Dr. Menon. You said Blue Ocean, one of the leading training providers in the Middle East, and you do a lot of CPD stuff as well. What's your view about being experimental with training? Do you like to make sure everything's kind of there and very easy to explain and have a regulation behind what you're trying to do? Or literally, are you looking for the golden opportunity to say there is a gap and away we go and Blue Ocean gets straight in that void? What's your approach to that, Dr. Menon?
Okay, thank you, John. See, I would like to segment the profile of the people into Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, because the skill sets which are required for all these people are different. For example, somebody who is coming new to the job market, they need a different skill set. Somebody who is already there, like me, 30 years or, working for 20, 25 years, they need a different skill set. So we don't need to possibly teach them logistics or transportation. They are masters in the field because they have seen it all. They have been on the ground. Possibly to somebody in the Gen X category, we might need to train them on futuristic skills. Now, what are those futuristic skills? Now the world is changing, as we have seen. The pandemic has brought us a lot of changes. Possibly artificial intelligence, something related to, we are talking about driverless trucks. somebody who is at the age of 50, 55 might not even comprehend how can a truck drive without a driver unless they see some pictures and some videos, etc. But things are happening. So possibly a driver tomorrow might be out of the job. So what are the skill sets which we can instill in him, which can help him retain his job or do some value addition to what he is doing? Now, a person who is working on the floor for last 30 years or on the operations last 30 years is a very critical resource for any organization. He is not a liability. If they upskill him, possibly he can be a great asset to the organization. So, and somebody who is a millennial, who has some skills, he has learned certain, he has gained certain knowledge by certain methodology, what he has learned, what he has studied during his university. Possibly those are the people who had some university background or some educational background in transportation. To them, possibly we might need to give more skill-based training. You might have to give something which is more related to strategical part of supply chain. To those people, we need to educate them that you are not a cost center. You need to think like a profit center in an organization. So where we can groom them to become the future leaders in the industry. The third
thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So somebody who is already 50 years old, you tell them you are not a cost center, you have to think like a profit center, it might go out of their head. Yeah, it's not possible to instill because they already are ripe. Yeah, we cannot do any more, operations on them. But somebody who is very young, just out of college, just out of university, he must be learning everything digitally in today's world. Now, this is a skill. Transportation, supply chain, logistics, warehousing. This is a skill which somebody has to imbibe. It is not something which you can learn online. It's like learning swimming or cycling online, taking an online course. Okay, you acquire the knowledge, but you need to practically implement it. So that is why one of the big point which you're talking about is the internship. That comes into a big play. So people who studies out, the youngsters or the Gen Z category, they need to be properly groomed using internship methodology so that by the time they finish the course, the training program, plus the internship, they are really market ready and, help the organization grow. So
okay, thank you, Dr. Menan. I'm going to move on from that and actually pick up with Katie because obviously you've mentioned the word internship. I quite like this idea about, yes, you can't ride a bicycle theoretically. Katie, what are the employers telling you? I mean, obviously, you're bringing some really good talent out from the universities that you're working with, but what are the employers saying? Are they going, yes, give me an intern? Or are you almost having to just struggle to convince them to take someone straight from university? How are you finding that?
That's a great question, John. It's actually quite a mixed bag. I think now graduate talent has always been well looked on by organizations, but from a graduate perspective, it's becoming more and more competitive as a sector, getting that first foot in the door, getting those interviews, getting called back, having a second interview. Companies want that graduate talent, but there is definitely a skills gap between where graduates and young students often think they are and where companies think that they should be or what they'd like them to be. And I think sometimes for young professionals starting off, their thoughts of where they are is slightly higher than where the companies often then find them to be when they get started. And I think we've had growing conversation around that over the last probably at least 4 or 5 years now, and that's continuing to show. And I think that's because we're seeing so much rapid technological advancement, specifically in the industry areas we're all here to talk about today, but also just generally in the world of work. And universities and education providers are trying to keep up with that as quickly as they can, but realistically, and I know we're going to come back to this, I think one of the only ways people really can stay up to date as quickly as possible is that industry experience. So how do you marry the two together, marrying the subject related experiences and knowledge that you need to have to go into something quite specific like transportation, logistics, supply chain, with the soft skills, the digital skills that are going to allow you to actually get in and get on with the job when you get there. So for me, I think over the next few years, the ability to kind of be creative and have critical thinking and upskill yourself are going to be at the fore of what employers are going to be wanting to see from graduates, and internships are going to help them on that way, because companies often want to train kind of like to a specific in-house style or a specific platform that they're using or piece of technology. So the universities aren't going to be able to do that for every student, but they're able to give them a strong, secure training in those digital and transferable skills, so the companies can then themselves go, you've got the basic package of what we need. Now, how do we actually make you fit what we're working in specifically as an industry area?
I think, yeah, you're absolutely right there, Katie. One of the challenges is what I would call the definition of oven readiness. So just take these two scenarios in your kitchen. One is that you have prepared food, you've got it oven ready, but actually it needs to be cooked, you know, for a long time for the flavors. You know, you can't stick it in the microwave. And then the other option is you actually have something that's pre-made, pre-cooked, processed, and all you have to do is microwave it. And I kind of think it like that from an employer perspective, that they may think someone is coming that is skills rich, because all they have to do is to give them the knowledge to be able to work with it. And actually what they find is they're probably knowledge rich with a huge amount of intelligence and ability, but actually some of the skills that you would expect them to be able to just do, actually they haven't been able to practice them. So I think that there is probably a little bit of a mixed match of expectation about whether you're using the microwave meal or whether you're doing the slow cooker model. And I think internships have actually can go a long way to trying to get those two poles closer together. Let's talk about the skills gaps a bit more. Perhaps go back to Chris. We heard about skills gap briefly there from Katie. Obviously, skills gaps can happen for a number of reasons. You've got skill shortages, you've got the fact that courses and things aren't being updated, but also technological advances that are so fast that you can't even train the trainer. What's your experience within the hydrogen sector on that, and the speed of hydrogen tech? Do you just want to reflect on that?
Well, I'm very happy to do that, but I just want to go back to the previous point, John, because I think, you know, one of the really important things that we need to build on, and we are starting to build on in the UK, is that employers, particularly from the advanced engineering sector, are really seeing the value of modular degree apprenticeship programs as opposed to the traditional 3-year degree course, because it gives them a chance to mold their graduates into the culture, and they come out, to coin your terms, oven ready. And I think that we really need to build on that. And in particular, we're going to need to build on it in terms of new technology, because as you say, the rate of pace of change, particularly around things like hydrogen, electrification and digitization, is almost exponential. And one of the challenges that we're facing here with our pilot in the Southwest is that, for example, yesterday I sat down with a number of key regional players in the transport sector to define what their current skills and training gaps are around hydrogen and its application in the transport sector. But a far bigger challenge is going to be, how do we bring in the training provision into the regional universities and the regional institutes of technology that enable us to start delivering that introductory level of training? And it comes back to your point, John. Train the trainer for new technology is going to be one of the blockers. And what we have to try and do is encourage the academic provision side of this supply chain to start to work collaboratively. And that is something that, from my industry perspective, looking at it from the industry end of the telescope, is a real challenge in the UK, because, to put it bluntly, academic institutions have very sharp elbows. And I can't see, unless there is some form of political encouragement, how we're going to overcome that problem, because that is the only way, by collaboration, we're going to be able to keep pace with the rapid change of technology over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I can see Katie nodding there.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm going to follow that up with another question, actually. As you know, our panel has got different countries, different cultures. You've got different views. You're in different places within that, if I can call it education, but within that spectrum. Okay. What happens if I say to you, I 100% agree with what Chris is saying, and that actually we must work with industry demand going forward as the main driver for training and education? So if I go with the sharp elbows scenario you just painted, what's your reaction if I say, actually, come on, industry demand has now got to be, it's not a nice to do, and then almost fit graduates into certain pigeonholes? We can't do that anymore. Industry demand has to be the predominant driver going forward. Reshma, what would you say to that? You're in a different cultural situation. Malaysia's got tons of universities, and some of them, extremely good. But
so I think, So honestly, John, listening to Chris and even Katie speak, I felt like, okay, so it's not just our problem. I honestly thought it was just our problem. So we have that too. We have a bunch of graduates. So we've got two scenarios here. We have graduates who come out, like you say, hot from the oven, but maybe the industry does not have the appetite for them. Generally because what textbook is never the same as the real world. And the other scenario is the generation, the new generation, the millennials, most of them, they also, when they come into companies here, if the company is not up-paced, has not paced itself a little bit more in terms of being more socially visible and all that. In this part of the world, everybody loves social media. So that social media engagement thing is really important here. So you also see a lot of them leaving jobs very quickly as well. But coming back to the academic sector and the industry, yes, here in Malaysia, it has been clearly recognized in a sense that the government here itself, the Ministry of Higher Education, has actually put out grants for the industry and the academia to work together to craft out programs. We have these like placement programs and upskilling programs that we're doing to match the needs and to upgrade and to get the graduates involved with the industry. I mean, it's a slow process, but at least we can see that it is something that they notice that is needed. It has always been a gap where the universities are churning out graduates that the industry really is not what the industry is looking for. So these gaps are being bridged here actually, slowly, but we're getting there.
Okay, so what we're hearing here is it's a bit of a global challenge. So Katie, can I swing back to you? You're working with a number of universities, not just in the UK. What's your take on this? Is there a general trend that actually the graduates have to work a bit harder to really show that they have the right skills to make the internship work? What's your opinion on that?
I would say 100% graduates are having to work harder now to show, one, they've got the skill sets, and two, actually stand out from their own cohorts. They're all coming out with often very relevant degrees from good universities, but they're still finding they're not prepared for the fact that they're not going to land a job within a week. They're going to have to put in some really hard graft to showcase that they've thought about the industry, they've thought about where they want to go. If they've not managed to already have, say, a year in placement or a 3-month or 6-month internship, or what else have they been doing to build that knowledge and interest and show that they've got that desire to learn outside of just the degree? So I think there's a lot that they have to think about, which maybe wasn't quite as heavily pushed maybe 10 years ago. I don't want to say it wasn't already there, but definitely internships has become a word that's grown rapidly over the last 10 years. And you didn't quite have to have done quite the same experience 10 years ago for some degrees as people now expect, because there's so much competitive market. I think just to go back to your other question, it's easy to say universities need to do this, this and this, industry needs to do this and this. I am a strong believer that I think now we do need to be very industry led on everything. I wrote down earlier ahead of this session, industry, education providers, or people that like myself that are working with education providers need to be thinking about talking to companies, surveying them, how do we partner with them. Partnerships and being innovative are going to be absolutely key to continuing to find ways to make sure that young people are skilled for where they're going into, and the companies feel that they are getting the skill level they're looking for, or as rapidly able to get the skill level they're looking for once they get started. And so we're finding with the universities we're partnering with, you've got to find the people that are willing and ready to be innovative, who might take a program and go, how can we change this around, and how can we work with companies, partners that will introduce us to companies to actually make that possible now. And it is slow. I think Reshma said it'd be lovely if you could change it overnight, but we know that these big institutions move slowly, and sometimes you do have to go 18 months out to plan what that program's going to look like. So then you've got the hiccup of how do we make it current if everything's moving so quickly, if it's taking us 18 months to plan a new cohort, a new program, a new practical and experiential learning piece alongside an academic course. So sorry, I feel like I've given you a lot there, John.
No, you have. I mean, I'm going to move on to Dr. Menon and others, but just one key challenge here. We kind of all saying, you know, industry does need to lead the way. The skill sets have to fit the bill for industry purposes. But what would you say about what industry has to do to make this work? So internships is not work experience, is it, Katie? There's a material difference. And is there still an issue where culturally some organizations might still treat the intern as the person that does some admin and the photocopying, and actually isn't really being stretched to their full potential? Do you think there's still some weaknesses there?
Yeah, I think there is still some weaknesses there. I would say that sometimes, again, it comes down to individuals' ideas of what a work placement or work experience or an internship is. And organizations like ourselves and like a lot of the education training providers you work with, being able to actually coach and work with industry to kind of showcase what we want them to be able to get from an internship. So yes, there is still some companies that maybe don't see it as kind of as practical work experience as some of us that are pushing for internships to be. But there is obviously still a number of soft skills that can be garnered from it. So it's working with companies to go, well, what's the balance? You might not be able to put them on some Metatronics project or directly straight out working with hydrogen. It's not going to be feasible. It's just not possible. You've not got the right skill sets. But how can they come in positions to gain insight and understanding into how the industry and the business is working? So I think there's definitely a balance. We are seeing a bigger shift. Most companies that I speak to now, they want to give people that experience. They want to be able to give them something that they can take away, whether that's a one-off project that they've done work on for 3 months that helps the business, but is something they can say, here's a portfolio piece that I've done, or whether that's day-to-day work that actually by the end of 3 months they've come away and you can see, we started here and we finished here, and someone else is now able to pick this up and continue it on. I think the more meaningful that work can be, the better. We know that already, but companies do seem to be also moving in that direction. A lot of people that I speak to say to me, we want our placements to be beneficial to us and to the young person coming in. We don't want to just bring someone in to sit in the corner. But that is a cultural change. We have been seeing that happen, and there's a little bit to go, but I'd say on the larger part, more companies are much more significantly engaged with how they make it a win-win, worthwhile, beneficial growth experience.
Okay, thank you. Just before we close this bit down, Dr. Menon, just quickly, what's the experience like in the Middle East? Are you finding high levels of satisfaction with the training and everyone going, yeah, this is exactly what we need? Or is there still this time lag between finding out what the industry needs and then you fulfilling it? What are your challenges at the moment as a training operator?
Okay, I would like to answer this in 2 parts. The first part is the cultural aspect. Luckily, we are operating across Middle East, Africa, and Indian subcontinent. So every market has its own challenges. For example, Dubai is a very matured market. Here, the scope for interns are very less because the market always need industry-ready professionals, people with experience. A person who is studying in Africa or in Indian subcontinent, they have a different set of challenge. There is a lot of appetite for, good quality people, whether they are industry ready or not, because the market is booming. So they need more and more people who has knowledge, not possibly necessarily the skills. They need somebody who understands the basics of supply chain. They need somebody who understands the basics of transportation. So those markets which are booming at a faster pace than the other rest of the world, they need people who has knowledge, not possibly necessarily the skills. To address this, the second part, I was lucky enough when I started my career in the early 90s. I did not join as an intern, but rather as a management trainee. And I think this is what I'm going to say will help all the professionals. When I was recruited as a management trainee, I was not only trained in supply chain management or in procurement or in transportation. I was trained across all the functions in an organization. I was first given training in sales. I was then given training in marketing. Then I was given training in purchasing. I was given training in stores. I was given training in finance. I was given training in HR. So over a period of 6 months, as a professional, I understood how an organization works. Now, somebody who is coming out of the college or a university, once he gets such an exposure, he gets a 360-degree view. So he knows what he has to do in the supply chain or in transportation, which contributes holistically to the organization. He's not just doing a job, but he actually is working as a part of the entire mechanism in an organization. So if companies can imbibe that, then the industry, I'm sure, will benefit a lot from the knowledge, what they're getting from the training, plus the skills which they will be imparting during this. We cannot say internship, like Eddie said, soft skills. I will go one step further. Not only soft skills is very important because people are generally not very well versed with, communication, behavior, time management, etc. But also the other departments, how they work, not only supply chain or transportation. That will make them a very thorough professional. Thank you, John.
Excellent. No, thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. I'm going to turn to some specifics now, if that's okay. And I want to go to areas where there are acute skill shortages. So we've heard from Chris earlier about the issue of, a new technology, an evolving technology. Things have got to be tested and it's quite rapid. Let's go to something else which is affecting actually globally, and that's the area of driver shortages. So we've seen those in the UK, in Europe, and across the world. So James, your pet area, what do you think needs to happen to fill these gaps in the short term? And do you think we need some global standards for transport manager and driver training? What's your thoughts?
I think the first thing with driver shortage is it's a global problem. And it has been for a number of years. It's not just a pandemic thing. It's not just something that's happened over the past 10 years. It goes way back beyond that. And what we're seeing actually globally is a migration of drivers. So you have drivers moving from one country to another to fulfill more opportunity. And they get more opportunity, not just commercially, but also through training in their own development. But of course, then there's a gap between the country they've left and the country that's sort of filling that gap. So but the whole mobile sort of shift of drivers is not really solving the driver shortage. It's just moving along. But what's interesting, and I'll come back to a point that Reshma made earlier, which sort of pricked my ears up a bit, was the funding of training. And actually how some of the central funds have gone into Malaysian transport training companies, because we're seeing the same over here, and a sort of happy coincidence, if I can call it that, of the pandemic and highlighting drivers is one, drivers are actually finally getting a bit of recognition in terms of their value. But secondly, the UK government have actually applied some funding for colleges, and there are a number of colleges around the UK that have HGV boot camps or truck boot camps that are fast tracking people who have never driven to become HGV drivers within a very short space of time. And that is a collaboration that we've not seen before. And we spoke about sort of communication and the importance of academic and vocational communication, which has never historically happened brilliantly. But I think it's starting to turn a corner. It's not going to solve the driver crisis by any means, but I think it's going to help sort of sustain things for a bit longer, because the colleges, once they've done the course, will keep the course. So there is essentially more training being done more of the time. And I think that will go some way towards addressing part of the problem.
Thanks, James. Reshma, you're in a similar space to James.
Yeah.
What's your view?
So exactly as James has mentioned, James, we're doing the same thing. So we've actually developed, when I say we, I mean CILT Malaysia. It's a big project that we're doing currently in Malaysia. We've created a framework. Of course, we've emulated a lot from the UK and from Australia as well. And we've actually taken this out to the community colleges. So similarly, we're looking at that, taking the programs out to the community colleges so we can literally attract more, students or people into the driving school, so to speak, to get more truck drivers. But I think another thing is, if I may say so, for a very long time, even logistics was never really spoken much about. It didn't have that, appeal to it. People like to say that it wasn't sexy enough, but it slowly did become that. And I think the pandemic kind of like made us all superheroes, right? People in the logistics field. So I would say it is the same thing with truck drivers. It's never seen as a position of appeal. It's like, at least in Malaysia, if you ask around, the current truck drivers, if you talk to them, it's not something that they had chosen to, a field that they chose to get into. It was somehow they had to get into it based on needs. So we've been following a lot of TikTok in China, and China is doing some really interesting work, encouraging women into truck driving. So we're trying to see how we can also encourage more women into truck driving as well to, fill up certain gaps and bring in some gender balancing as well into this area.
Okay, I'm going to leap back to another thought, because we've got a couple of minutes just to pick up on this, and I'm going to invite anyone else really that wants to add. Is yes, it looks like we're turning a corner around the training environment, making it more relevant, more up to date. We're trying to speed up recruitment within certain skills gap areas. Drivers is just one of them. But what about not attracting the same people that look like us and sound like us? So this is around issues of gender, race, wider inclusion. Anyone want to say about that? Because I would hope that, year by year by year, we're improving in being more inclusive in who we bring into these industries. Anyone got a view on that? Katie, you might want to kick it off actually, because I know from meeting a lot of the interns, they are, in terms of the sort of blend of who we're seeing, it is all different types of people. But yeah, how do we make sure it is inclusive and we're not just repeating the same kind of market trends of who we attract into the industry?
I think that's a really good point and a really good one for us to finish on actually, because and with Reshma just bringing it up, I used to have a real stereotype until I met you, John, at SILT, and Reshma with the comment that she just made around truck drivers. And I think it's fantastic the work that you guys are doing around your female truck driver programs. And for me, that really highlighted an understanding being needed again of what are the pain points, because it is going to be different from industry to industry in terms of who they attract, who they don't attract, and how they diversify. So understanding what everyone's seeing. For people like myself who work as kind of third-party providers, it's that knowledge. For me, it's learning from people in their industries. What are they seeing? But then it's also working with specific organizations and universities to think of programs like you have done that kind of pick up and scoop up people that we know are going to need additional support and access. So for example, in the UK, we have a university that supports a cohort called widening participation. That is quite a specific term, but it basically means that people from certain backgrounds with certain attributes that have basically been identified as having a career attainment gap when they finish their education and go into work, kind of have been identified as these are people that could benefit from having an additional stepping stone of practical experience and support, and maybe a more cohesive program put around them. So I think it's really important that as education providers, tech industry specialists, we're all able to actually communicate and understand from each other what are the pain points, who are we seeing, where are we seeing gaps, and how could we fill them, so we can again come up with creative programs and opportunities that are maybe specifically targeted, at least in the first places, at those people that we want to, that we know need that additional stepping stone for one reason or another in their training or their experience.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Before we go to the very, very last question, Chris, I'm going to throw that one at you a little bit, because I guess your big challenge is around dealing with some stuff in the immediate, but how does this whole hydrogen, the sweat program, etc., tackle the issue of inclusion and diversity?
To be honest, John, I don't think it has a particular focus, except that there is an underlying focus throughout the kind of advanced engineering and technology industry to get much greater representation from women, from ethnic minorities. And I think it's almost ingrained into any policy or strategy that we're working on, that this is a given. So that would be my response.
Oh, great. Thanks, Chris. So our final thing for everyone to go on. So this is literally a final sentence from each of you. The question I'm asking is about the scale of change we need to do learning. So do we need to be radical in the way that we start to teach, learn, or equip people? So mentoring, coaching, more individual bespoke training, does that have a role? Or is there something else that we need to accelerate the pace that's a bit more than, well, we can have a grant for now and get people through the door? So whilst boot camps, coaching programs, internships, they're all really, really good things, but do we need to be far more radical to get that industry focus? I'll kick off, if I can, with James.
Yeah, okay, I'll keep it short. So for me, more flexibility with the legal framework, that would help enormously. I think there's also a worry about Zoom training becoming the norm, certainly within driver vocational training. I think that would be a backward step. A lot of people don't, but I do. And I think actually more tools and more use of creativity with tools. And I'm talking from a vocational point of view. So for me, more micro learning, more flexibility, that should do the trick.
Right, I'm hearing kind of bite-sized, easy, digestible learning, okay, is what I'm hearing from you. Dr. Menon, what would your answer be to that question?
I would say we need to make the industry more attractive. Like a truck driver, he will definitely does not want his next generation to become a truck driver. So we need to make it more attractive for the people. We need to motivate them so that they come into this industry with the right skill set. They should not look down upon this industry, because earlier, traditionally, the concept was if somebody was not good in any other profession, let's put him in warehouse or let's put him in transportation. Okay, so the industry was, this particular profession was looked down upon, unfortunately to say, but slowly, like it is, Reshma said, now we are becoming the star walls of the industry. Big companies are recognizing, like UPS and FedEx and CMA, CGM. Big companies are really recognizing the supply chain professionals for the work which they have been doing in the last 2 years. So suddenly everybody has woken up and want to become a supply chain person. So that itself is a motivation, but I think we need to do much, much more in this sphere.
No, definitely around that premier profession status. Reshma, what do you feel about this?
I'm going to take a little bit of everything. I think when you talk about executives and above, people want to know the market generally, the way I see it around here, and also working with Willat's capacity building center based on that. The need seems to be people want to know what's new out there, what's the best practices. They want it short, sweet, you know, not too long programs, everything to the point. And when we talk about the you know, the levels below executives, you know, the operatives and all, I agree with James. You know, there's about as much you can do in terms, because there are certain skills you cannot teach over Zoom. And the only other way is it has to be a practical training, either together with the trainee, or investments must be made into more, you know, virtual training. And because the younger generation generally love, you know, game controls and all that. So it should be towards them in order to interest them and get them into this field. Like, for instance, in Malaysia, we have a gap of maritime lawyers. So that's another area where we're trying to talk to students in law schools and trying to get them into looking at a career in maritime law as well. So, you know, so we can have a good supply of maritime lawyers here in the country.
Excellent. Thank you. Chris, what's your take on this?
I'm going to be a little bit controversial because I think that there needs to be a revolution rather than an evolution in training provision. And it must be, with a capital must, be delivered from industry's demand requirements. And in an ideal world, it needs to be delivered in a modular format over what I call a lifelong training culture, so that it can keep pace with the accelerating change of technology over the next decade or two. So that currently in the UK is going to be a revolution and not an evolution.
Yeah. It's
and
not
we need to accelerate that.
Yeah, not a reworking or a fiddling about. It's a radical rethink. Yeah,
yeah,
no?
Radical rethink.
Radical, excellent. Katie, coming to you last. You get the final say.
Oh,
yeah,
pressure.
What do you think we need to do? Radical or something else?
Well, interesting. It was interesting to hear Chris's just comment actually just now about radical, because I had written down how do we foster lifelong learning and reskilling when I was kind of thinking about today's talk. I hadn't connected it with radical, but actually maybe that is quite radical to be thinking about when people come in, how do we get them throughout the course of their career cycle to be keeping up with current trends, retraining for new ideas. So for me, it was more of a pick and mix. How do we actually embed a complete network of mentoring, coaching, experiential learning, so the young people are entering with a bigger kind of overall connectivity between them, and that carries on, whether that's through the organizations that they're then working for, or through training that those organizations choose to opt in with providers for being innovative around lifelong learning. So yeah, a little bit of everything, I think, from me. So sorry, slightly on the fence there.
No, but actually the challenge here, I think, is that lifelong learning is a concept that's been around for quite some time. We as CILT insist that our chartered members and, if you like, our official members of a certain level have to keep a CPD record, but it's kind of not mandated. You know, you don't lose your status if you forget to fill it in. I think that there's something here. Mandatory lifelong learning is probably the wrong way to go. It's really around understanding the value. You must be self-motivated in order to do that. And in order to do that, you probably need a mentor to encourage and develop you. And that mentor can either be more of a soft skills or a life coach skills, or it could be a technical mentor within an evolving, fast-paced industry. My personal view on this, and I'll throw it in at the end, is that mentoring is kind of, people misunderstand the value of mentoring because they think it's, they have a vision of what it might be for them. And actually mentoring as a concept can be quite, it can be directive, it can be advisory, it can be in quite a hands-off coaching manner, it can cover those life skills, but it can also cover very, very detailed technical challenges. And the skill is really just trying to match the mentee and the mentor reflectively and put them in the right framework. I firmly believe that as we go into almost a high-tech sort of super Zoom culture, yeah, that we are going to need mentors more than ever, because actually, if we do everything by tech, okay, it's doable, but people will become human contact poor. And in order to keep up your motivation to learn and to develop, you actually do need sometimes to sit down with a coffee and talk it through. And it's as simple as that. So I think we have to remember everything's accessible at the click of a button, but actually building relationships and trust and talking through the emotional side of your career development, yeah, you're going to need another human for that. So let's not forget the value of the soft skills and the human contact that's so valuable to get the best from your employees and staff. Thank you, everybody. People are nodding, so kind of that's a good place to stop. Thank you so much for all your time. So thank you to Chris, to Reshma, to James, to Katie, and Dr. Satya. It's been an absolute joy to have you with us. Very different dimensions from all over the world. Hopefully those of you watching have found something valuable here to take away and apply. Keep on thinking about this lifelong learning and development of people within your own organizations. CILT are here to help, but reach out to professional bodies that you look to, whoever they are, to try and get the support and guidance you need. So thank you so much, everybody. Stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day.